All right, you want the sad news?
Now the sad
The
news.
sad news is this is American beech right here. And do you see the striped leaves?
Yeah.
This is beech leaf disease.
Okay.
So beech leaf disease was only discovered about 10 years ago in Ohio. It's said that a nematode is the agent of the disease, and it's this tiny little nematode that can. There's small holes in the leaves, so the leaves can exchange water and take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen.
So this will spread because it seems like there's other.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So 2 years ago, this wasn't here.
Okay.
Last spring, a year ago spring, it showed up in my backyard, and I came down here and I found it on a few trees, and now it's all through this forest. It's a silent wildfire.
It's going to kill them?
Yeah.
It's going to kill them.
Okay.
You know,
It's
1,
terrible.
2, 5% will survive. Hopefully, that's how evolution kind of works. I don't know what the exact number is. Don't really quote me on that, but there will be individual survivors. But it's so new. Some people say that it's the nematode that's associated with this that's never been described to science before. You know, they're like, oh my gosh, there's a nematode in all these leaves, and they looked at it and they said, we don't know what nematode this is. They named it.
Yeah.
Like we didn't know it existed because it's so microscopic. It gets into the tiny pores, which is unbelievable. But there are some people that say that doesn't make sense. It's just the nematode is here, but that doesn't mean that's what's causing it. So we don't know hardly anything about this. There are people that will tell you they can, if you come to your yard, they could put some, treatment to it that'll take care of it. I highly encourage you not to use your money that way, because if scientists don't know what's happening,
Yeah.
and scientists are not the final authority, but if scientists are still describing the animal related to this, we don't know what's going on.
That's right.
Right.
And it's just blowing up faster than you can imagine.
Yeah.
If this had 50-foot flames, it'd be on the national news, but it doesn't, because it's actually kind of pretty and really cool, stripy leaves, but it's really sad.
So do you see, I mean, with all of these different pathogens, so you say 2% again might survive, right?
Of the trees, maybe.
I mean,
I don't know. Yeah.
Are the chestnuts then from those 2% regenerating and spreading? Or the ash
they are
also?
Finding individual trees of American chestnut that are surviving and flowering and producing fruit.
Yeah.
And there's a man in Maine who has taken it upon himself to collect those and spread them, and they're doing okay.
Okay. And
So-
the ash also, is that?
Oh, the ash is still a new story.
Okay.
Blue ash, which is a southern species, seems to be a little more resistant to what's happening
Okay.
to the emerald ash borer.
Yeah.
But I haven't followed on what the survival rate is. But I think, millions of years ago, we had a mass extinction on this earth. And obviously we're here. The world survived. But one of those extinctions, it took 1,000 years to really have life come back.
Yeah.
So we, in our lifetimes, might see that 1 or 2 trees here and there survive from these diseases. But maybe in 200 years or 300 years, they will adapt, evolve, and maybe not become a new species, but just adapt and learn to live with the pathogen or the pest that's here, and maybe they'll flourish again. Now, we are doing all kinds of things with genetics, with American chestnut, to try to save it. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it'll work. And, the human knowledge is increasing so rapidly right now that maybe we can do something about it. Yeah. I'm not fully convinced that what we're doing for American chestnut is actually good for the environment. There's some skepticism that releasing the new genetic variations of American chestnut actually might cause some other problems. I don't mean to be cynical about it, but
We don't always know the consequences of what we're up to.
We don't. And then when we start doing things with individuals that live 200 to 400 years,
Yeah.
and the science of ecology is in the eastern North America, the Western science of ecology is 120 years, but really only maybe really great observations since the 30s or 40s or 50s. What do we know about the lives of these trees and these ecosystems?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's a good year for chestnut saplings all through Rockland Ave. There's loads of
oh really?
new baby chestnuts.
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe they're new, maybe they're resprouts. I don't know. But
Yeah.
yeah.
They grow to a certain size, and then the blight is always here.
Yeah.
The blight comes back
Yeah.
and kills them back, and
Yes.
then they resprout.
Yes.
So they've resprouted several times in the last 80 to 100 years.
Yeah.
And it's funny, you know,
So they're resprouting from roots in the ground.
from
is
the
what you're
original
saying,
rootstocks. Yeah, the root systems are still alive.
Yeah.
And this is this large tree right here near us. This is another American beech. And the other thing that's happened here in the woods along the blue-green trail is that beech bark disease showed up pretty strongly.
Oh, that's another one. Huh?
Right before the pandemic started. It was here, but it really started showing up in 2020 or so. At the beginning of the
That's
pandemic.
different from the leaf thing then.
It's different from the leaf thing. And this is a funny thing that I don't understand. Beech bark disease has been here for 70 years or more. I don't know exactly how long. But it's been impacting forests in the Northeast for 70 years at least. And it just started hitting this pocket of beech trees and the one in my yard just in the last 4 or 5 years. So we've been pretty lucky that way. There's a beech tree way over there that the bark is smooth and clean like we typically expect that you'll see in any textbooks.
Yeah.
And this one's getting knotty and broken up and a little warty, and that's what beech bark disease looks like. But this is a nice catch. I love this individual. Again, this is
Musclewood again.
musclewood.
Yeah.
I like the word musclewood. I think it's called hornbeam.
Oh, it's hornbeam.
I think it's hornbeam. There's the hot hornbeam, which is a different species. But this is, I think, official scientific common name is hornbeam. I like musclewood.
Yeah, like it's easy to remember too.
Yeah, it's easy to remember, and that's what it looks like. So this is a nice little area. It's flat. It's a nice confluence between the Assabet River over here, and then again the stream we're going to cross over here. And American beech, you know, we might think about it as more in the mountains, but it does really well in these little floodplain systems. I saw it down in Auburn, Alabama along a stream, and it does well in South Carolina along a stream in systems like this. So this actually has a lot of southern feel to me. This little, flat area above the river feels southern to me. There's American beech here, which we think of as a northern species, and it is. But I've seen it down in the southeast in these settings perfectly. And I paused here for a quick second because the species we forgot about that we haven't been talking about is elm.
Huh.
And so elm is an important part of wetlands and river systems, and it's another one that's been hit by disease. They don't get as big as they used to. They might not be as common as they used to be because of the Dutch elm disease. But they're still here. The bark is still beautiful. I don't see any signs that it is. Okay. There is one in the trailhead off of Concord that I've watched. It finally died.
Yeah.
It got to a big size and it died. And I don't know if you remember the drought, summer 2016.
Yeah.
That was a really hot drought, really sharp drought. But it was only like a year and a half drought, and that's not typically quite enough to kill trees. But the trees that died were ones that are disease prone,
Right.
like cherries, and then elms. I saw elms dying a little bit, and they're already stressed out. So I don't I don't know what the physical external characteristics of Dutch elm disease are, but you know they're dying back. Oh, and I wanted to tell you one other thing here. Right, the animal that we didn't talk about yet is the beaver.
Sure.
Down further stream, there was one that I used to see that year that the few years that I hiked regularly. I would scare it up every once in a while. But they love this area. So this is an open forest.
There's another.
Right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of, if you start looking, there's a lot of small stumps from the beavers. So this nice open field is thanks to the beavers. We like this condition, but the beavers like it too.
Yeah.
And so there was a beaver or two downstream. It would make its little home along the, it didn't create the big classical den that they build. In moving waters, they will make a home along the side of the river. And someone said that they call them bank beavers because they live on the bank. I like that name.
Bank beavers.
Bank beavers.
How
Another musclewood.
Oh yes. Yeah. No.
And here's a pretty good big one here. I like this section of the trail because of all the musclewood. And you know, this is where they do fine. It's finally dry enough
I'm going
here.
to be very aware of musclewood now.
I know.
Yeah.
This is where you'll find it, typically, down along streams. It's still flowing pretty well. I didn't expect this since we haven't hardly had any rain. So
Is this drought tough on these trees? Because we've had so little.
It is in some ways, but if we're going to have a drought, this isn't a bad time of year to have it.
Okay.
It'll impact their growth next year. When we have dry August and September, it really hurts the trees, but not badly. I shouldn't use the word hurts. It limits their growth more than next year.
Okay.
Because right now trees are shutting down, but they're also growing their roots and moving nutrients around. There's a lot of things happening inside the tree, and so a lack of water in August and September reduces their growth the following year.
Okay.
It's not so bad. It shortens the leaf season pretty much.
Right.
There could be worse, but this is a really strong drought. It's amazing how dry it's become.
And the exposed roots back there, how urgent is it to get a boardwalk over those roots at the beginning of the trail?
Well, it'd be nice to do that first. So one stewardship idea is find ways to impact ourselves to have less of an impact.
Yeah.
And that area that's a wetland, probably technically, all that we walk through.
Yes.
So it'd be really great if that was elevated.
That's right.
So we don't compact the soils, and so the water flows through nicely on the surface. I want to stop here for a quick second because this is where the forest starts to transition. So we've come uphill slightly. That's my neighborhood up over that way. That's very sandy soil, so you could think of this as probably an ancient river system where the banks deposited lots of sand. It's a kind of a silty sand. It's pretty nice. But if we look right here, that really large tree is, I'm pretty sure that's a northern red oak. They're one of the fastest growing trees here in the northeastern United States. They come in soon after agricultural abandonment and logging in this system, so that's a sign of the history of this landscape in some ways. But next to it, one of my favorite trees, that little twisty medium-sized tree that's it's really sinuous. It's going to the right and to the left and back to the right. That's white oak. And then it's arching out over here where it's finding a gap. That's beautiful right now. And I worked hard to get a white oak planted downtown because you can see it in this tree. If you trace the canopy of this white oak, its leaves are red.
Yeah.
But a darker burgundy red. And I don't know why I never associated red with white oak leaves, but a lot of them are.
The red oak has
The red
more
oak
green yellow leaves than the white oak.
Yeah, so red oak is typically one of the last trees to drop its leaves in the Northeast, so it's not as far along in its fall processes.
I see.
But there's one over here, and you can see it's kind of orange. The leaves are orange.
Yes.
That's I think that's another red oak. I think that's another red oak, northern red oak. And that's about as pretty as it gets for red oak. I'm not the biggest fan of red oak leaf color in the fall, but white oak there's one down here that sometimes can be stunning. But I stop here because to me, this is a southern ecosystem again. We've got the red oak, we've got white oak, we've got a couple other white oaks here. This is a pretty simple system in this section, but from here east, now along this south-facing bank, so now the sun is behind us, right? It's early morning, the sun is rising. So this is kind of a south-facing bank. The south is that way. And so now we're getting into a southern ecosystem. And the farther we get along, we're going to start picking up hickories. So then we're moving into that classic oak hickory ecosystem.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
But then moving down slope, once we get closer to the river, we start getting other species. So at the head of the trail, we have a silver maple, which is a floodplain system. I've seen them in Missouri. They're amazing, silver maple. But a lot of these maples, like this big one right here, that's a red maple.
What's the one next to it, the dead one?
That's American beech.
Okay.
Yeah.
They seem to be very close together.
Yeah. And if I may, I would advocate for dense planting of trees. We get our aesthetic from the idea that from parks that we should have widely spaced trees.
Right.
Capability Brand's problem, wasn't it?
Who? What?
He English aristocrats who like their parklands.
Oh, okay.
No comment. So, I don't plant my trees that closely together, but in our 3rd acre lot or whatever it is, I've planted, I don't know how many, 60 trees and shrubs.
Okay.
So trees can live next to each other. It's really
Well, that's good.
not uncommon. You could find it in a lot of places. And they find their way around. They sort themselves out. This tree came down a few years ago. I did a quick count of the rings, which isn't exactly how I do my science. But it told me what I suspected is that this tree, this landscape, was... a lot of these big trees were probably established in the 1890s, which is just a common pattern in Massachusetts.
Oh, okay.
Not all forests.
Because that's when they sort of gave up on the farming sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, they started losing out to the Great Plains. And such stony soils, you can't do so much with it. It's been interesting walking this regularly because you know individual trees that fall down. You're like, oh, that's a new branch that came down. I remember when this white pine came down. You can see the stump right there, that big stump.
Oh, wow.
And here's the log that came down. I think that was 2021, something like that. There was a small snag back that way that housed woodpeckers. I watched a family, and then the next year it fell down, and now I can hardly see where it was in just 3 years. So this forest is always changing, but if you don't walk it every day, you don't see that change. And that's something we have to learn, that forests are always changing. This is a black oak. Right here, it's got more, it looks a little bit like red oak, but it actually has these broken, what we call furrows and ridges. So this is a furrow, this is a ridge, but this is broken up into blocks, which is classic black oak bark. It's closely related to red oak. They intermix. There are hybrids between red and black oak all over the place. I've been in forests where I can go, this is a black oak, that's a red oak. I don't know what that tree is. Because it's so well mixed. And so, and black oak is again more of a southern species. It doesn't go as far north as red oak. So we're down close to the river, so we're getting red maple here. We're getting some beech again. If you come hiking here in the winter along this section, it's really nice and warm actually.
Yeah, the sun is coming through.
Yeah. This is the woods aster, white woods aster. The population was huge a few years ago, and they seem to have died back a little bit. And this is one of my favorite sections right here. This is, yeah, that one looks like a, I guess that's, I always thought that was a black oak. I think it kind of is. But this twin stem tree right here, this is a white oak. And then down there's another black oak. And the fun thing you can do to, Tom Wessels has a series of lectures on YouTube about reading the forested landscape. He wrote that book. And so when I look at this and you see the twin stem white oak, that's a really nice big tree, but what I can tell you is that probably 120, 130 years ago or so, that was one single tree. It was cut down, and it resprouted from its.
Oh, why? How do you know that?
Because it's two stems.
And they don't grow with two stems.
Yeah, they don't grow two stems
from the outside.
It can happen naturally.
Yeah.
But
if it's damaged or something.
But you can tell a landscape is old growth versus second growth by the number of twin stem trees like this. And there were a bunch of twin stem trees right here. This is one of my favorites. The fun thing you can kind of do, I don't know if it's 100% true, but I like to think sometimes that it might be, is if you take the midpoint of this stem and the midpoint of this stem and draw a circle, you can imagine that the mother tree was like this big in diameter. Wonderful. This was likely a quite large white oak, 140, 150 years ago. And then, I don't know when, 120 years ago I'd say, that it was cut.
Right.
And it resprouts from the stump.
Right.
And there probably was, 5 resprouts or 6 resprouts, and eventually 2 survived. I've seen a red oak in Massachusetts that has 7 stump sprouts that were like this big, all splayed out.
Oh wow.
Some were smaller, some were bigger.
Yeah.
I see our first hickory up. Oh, there we go. I saw the first hickory here, but here's our first hickory here. So this is pignut hickory, and how to describe that bark? I don't know. I don't know how to describe
marvelous, isn't it? It's like weaving or something.
Yeah, like ribbons of.
Yeah.
I like that. Yep. Here's some of its. Here's its leaf. What I love about hickories, and it's a little late now because they've faded, but they could turn a beautiful yellow. I have planted 4 hickories in my yard because I want to get this yellow. It's a bright yellow color when they're in full leaf in autumn. And so I planted 4. I hope I get 2 or 3 eventually. There's another big hickory up there. You can see it's weaving.
Yes, yes.
So there's some really large hickories in here. Relatively large. Hickory is typically slower growing. So when you see them that size, you want to walk up to this tree up here?
Yeah.
There's a nice hickory yellow.
Oh yes. Yes.
This is mockernut hickory. And boy, it looks more like mockernut down there, but it is mockernut. And what I think of mockernut hickory's bark is, you don't see it quite so much down here, but a little bit here, but up here, it looks like a pignut hickory that was steel that underwent a quick, mild melt. So the ridges are softened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see how they're softened up here? And there are hickories that can look like that, but to me, this is how I identify mockernut hickory. It's there are a number of leaflets on the petioles that people do. I'm not that type of botanist. But the twigs are actually quite stout. And younger individuals, we might see one or two along the trail. The color of their bark is like a blue-gray steel. I have a steel thing about about mockernut hickory in my brain. And
so it's like the other one, only sort of modified.
That's
is
right.
your impression of it.
That's right.
Yeah, it's like softened.
It's softened. Yep.
Yeah.
I think about it as quick melt, and it doesn't get as big as pignut hickory, so it's usually a smaller tree.
Right.
But mockernut being here, black oak being here, these are species that tend to be more common on soils that are richer in nutrients, but richer in nutrients that are in the higher pH, like calcium, magnesium, and there's another one I'm flipping on my mind, but basically slightly more basic soils. This isn't our soils here aren't basic, but they're a little more basic.
Okay.
They're not quite as acidic, but they're more nutrient-rich soils. I learned this species well when it was on top of the Palisades cliffs outside of New York City, and that's basalt. So it's a lot of magnesium.
But this you were saying was sort of floodplain, alluvial sort of, but it's still fairly rich.
Right, but so when I look at Summer Hill and then that hill that's above this Discovery Museum in Acton, those are like little outcrops of knobs. And so I wonder about the geology, that if they aren't some sort of basaltic leftover of some ancient geologic process that allows soils to develop that are slightly more nutrient rich.
Squirrel.
Oh yeah. And so when I see this and the black oak, I think the soils are a little more rich.
I see.
The oaks behind our house are almost entirely black oak, which is really unusual.
Yeah.
And that might be related to agriculture, but I also think it's related to soil type. And so what I also would look for in here is the maidenhair fern. This is another indicator of rich soils. And maidenhair fern is one of the prettiest ferns in my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you could ski, just ski down this slope.
I can see very down.
I think there's another mockernut, but I wanted to make sure we saw it before we ran out of time. So there's another. I just love the color of hickory.
Very pretty, isn't it?
I don't know. I think of the cornucopia thing when I see them. Yeah, and here's our
So
white oak.
what would that oak be? Because those colours are amazing.
Yeah, that's a white oak.
That's a white oak, it
Do
is.
you see the rounded lobes?
Yes. That's lovely.
So that's a white oak, and that's probably a red or black oak over there. And so younger.
Even though it's softened, soft, it's not got the pointy leaves, is it?
I think it does. Maybe not. Yeah, it's got the tips.
Okay.
It does, young,
Pointy tips.
juvenile people are like little all over the place in terms of who they'll become as adults. You got to think about trees that way. But yeah, this is what white oaks can do. And young black oaks or red oaks can do some lovely colors as well.
Stopped on me. Okay. Pignut.
Yeah.
Mockernut.
And it just looks like a pignut that underwent a partial melt.
Very nice.
So I want to look at this large oak over here.
Yes, indeed.
Looks like Well, it's a funny. It might be a white, but the leaf color doesn't look right. It's probably. It's got a little black characteristics. Maybe it's a black oak. But do you see how wide open the crown is?
Yeah.
So this is a sign that when that tree was established, let's say it was 130 years ago, it was one of the only trees in this area.
Right, right.
It's not growing straight and tall, it's growing out and open, suggesting that there wasn't much forest here for the first 50 years of its life, or something like that. That's just a rough estimate.
Yeah.
But then something changed and the forest started growing up underneath it. And eventually, maybe those branches will die off and drop off in the next 20 to 50 years, or not. But this is what we call a wolf tree. And there's a big argument about where the term wolf comes from, but basically it's a sign of a tree that was growing in the open and the forest grew up around it, or it was growing on the edge of a pasture. So you could say one side of this tree was open forest, open land, and the other side was a forest. And so it has branches going out into the open area. So that's another way we can read the landscape. So this was very different than back there. We didn't see any wolf trees back over that way. But there's a few of them in here. And I wanted to show you one other plant. This is maple leaf viburnum.
Gorgeous.
So it's an understory plant. It gets a little taller than that. It'll get larger in diameter. When I saw these and figured out what they were and saw them in the first fall, I bought one for my yard. And I put it in my front yard to get a lot of sun. And then it turned a darker, I don't know what colors you want to call that. There's so many colors in that. But it was a very dark, saturated, almost burgundy color, which was nice and pretty.
Yes.
But when you find these in shaded landscapes, it's more of a light lavender pink, and I like that color more, so I took mine. I moved my plants probably too much. I dug it up and I moved it into the back part of the yard where it's shaded, and right now its leaves are in our yard are a little more, these are darker. They've got that blackish red right here. Mine are a little lighter, like some of these down here, and I wanted that lighter color, so I moved it. So here's another black oak, really blocky, small blocky bark. So there's lots of hickories here now. Slightly drier, south-facing. There's a mocker nut. Up there, that twin stem tree looks like a mocker nut, pretty big one. A fellow that measures tall trees for a hobby came out here after I said there was mocker nut, and he said one of the tallest mocker nuts in Massachusetts is along this strip.
Amazing.
But I think that's also because no one's hardly measured mocker nut, you know?
Yeah.
As a species, but there's some fairly tall mocker nut in here for the species. And again, there's partly the richer soils alongside rivers. And probably more moisture running off the slope down to the river. So this is probably the sun is making it warm and slightly drier, but I would bet water flow from the upper, from the neighborhoods up there down here will keep them bathed. This is
What's that? Oh, it's a pine.
That's the eastern white pine, Pinus strobus.
Yeah.
It was one of my first trees. Oh, it died. Huh. This was alive just a couple of years ago. Huh. Yeah, it just died.
Yeah, why do you think it died? Is it just old? Like, is it?
It's not old.
Okay.
Trees don't die of age. They die of everything else.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe it got a disease. There's a current in the literature suggesting that bigger trees are more likely to die than smaller trees. And why that is maybe there's a lot to maintain. But when I think about white pine is the tallest documented tree species in eastern North America. And quite often in forests, they are in a position that we call dominant rather than co-dominant. So they emerge above the canopy. Like we understand this about tropical trees, right? You watch enough nature shows down in the tropics, they're like, look at that emergent blah, blah, blah tree.
Right.
These are our emergent trees.
Okay.
So when you're emergent, though, you're more susceptible to lightning. You're a big lightning rod. You're more susceptible to wind. You're more susceptible to snow and ice.
Okay.
So there's a price to be paid to be up above the canopy. And but there are diseases going around too. There was a disease that's called six needle leaf disease or pine disease. And we don't know what the cause of that is. Or even if it's native to the region or if it's a new pest, but it went through a few years ago and really browned a lot of pine trees, and some trees died. I don't know if this tree had it, but I know 2 years ago this was alive. Wow. And this was one of my favorite trees because I came through here in the winter, and you know, it's finally been documented in the scientific literature that birds in the winter will flock together. Different species will flock together in the winter.
Oh.
They will have multi-species flocks in the winter, and maybe it's a survival of the harsh time. But I came here and the birds, it was a sunny day, it was snowy, but it was a sunny day like this, warm, and the birds were chirping and being active, and I looked, and they were all different species.
Oh, wow.
And they were hanging around this tree, and so I think of this tree as the first time I saw a multi-species flock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were they, the species?
You know, there's the typical winter birds around here, but I think they were nuthatches. And, I don't think the jays were a part of that. Here's two more mockernuts. I've never seen them grow so straight and tall.
Yeah, they're a beautiful tree.
That's very uncharacteristic of the species, but these two are doing really well. This tree has been down for about 5, 6, 7 years or something like that. It's been what I do love about the benign neglect here is I get to watch ecological processes. All right, so a few years ago I saw a big log slowly floating down the river, and for the next few days I followed it until it got embedded in the bank over here. But this tree has not moved in 4 or 5 years.
And what kind of tree is this?
It looks like it was probably a black oak.
Okay.
It was a black or red. I remember when the beaver chewed that thing up. That was a few years ago too. But it's fascinating to see that this has not moved. Our family used to come and sit and eat lunch on this. Sometimes the kids would play on it. These have been in the water almost the same amount of time. There was that storm in 2018 that put a lot of trees down. March 2018. And Summer Hills, I gotta go back. I gotta check that out. There's a tree that I know that came down during that storm. These might be 2018 too.
That's right. A big yellow birch, wasn't it? Came down.
So here's
oh, that's a nice one.
Yeah, so this must get a little more shade. Up higher they're darker leaves, but down here there's the more light lavender pink. I like the lighter color because that's an unusual leaf color in the fall. So here's a beech that, this is what they should look like, the beech leaves. And then there's the beech leaf disease out there on the end. So. Yeah. Let's go to the fish treatment plant and then.
Sure.
There's a couple other things to show along the way. So they were pushing, that's a big lot that Maynard maintained. And I think they pushed soil over a few years ago, and now it's all invaded by knotweed. That knotweed wasn't there just a few years ago. Here's a multi-stem red maple, 3 stems at least or so. Here's another one, multi-stem.
That's how they grow, though, the red maple. They like the multi-stem thing.
Yeah, red maple's more prone to that. So here's a really amazing black oak right here.
Oh, yes.
A very clear wolf tree. And then there's another one over there with lower limbs. So when you see lower branch scars, you can see right where it's split into two stems, there's two dead branches.
Yeah.
That's the forest growing up next to it, reducing the amount of sunlight that's going into the leaves in those lower branches, and eventually the tree essentially cuts its losses.
Cuts them off. Huh?
Yeah, and growing right up. But that's a really large black oak for this area. Yeah, so this is a big oak grove. You can see it's got a lot of big oaks. This is a big red maple. Not huge, but that's a pretty good size red maple. So look at this red oak right here. And you can see you can see a spreading crown here. There's a spreading crown over there of an oak and over there. So this was a very different forest, a much more open forest with few scattered trees. Maybe this was a pasture for cows to come and shade. I don't know, or sheep. I don't know, but there was intention and there was purpose in having a few scattered large oak trees.
So these trees are older than your 120 years?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Or they managed it differently 130 years ago.
Okay.
I don't think they're bigger, but I don't think that means that they're older. I think it's a different management pattern. That would be my hypothesis, but we can always disprove hypotheses.
So there was a deliberate cultivation of these black oaks out here at some point. Yeah.
Because look at the structure, the architecture of that one. That's a big spreading crown, just like the one that's 100 feet. Maybe the people lived up there, maybe they had an estate and they wanted to park down by the river. Or maybe it was a shaded pasture, or I don't know. That just came down in the last year or so. The trail used to run right through that, but whoops, I went down too far, sorry. But this is a really wonderful oak grove in here with a mix of white pine. So then this is where you get your pine oak mixture, which is more southern too. Though they have southern pines usually mixing with oaks, not white pine. But up here it's white pine, and these are mostly black oak. But this is the large tree section of this trail, and it's a very different feel. That's a branch actually that we just stepped over. You see where it came off the...
Oh yes.
Oh wow, that tree. So that was a big open spreading crown.
Yeah. And
it's hard to maintain those big open spreading crowns. That's a lot of weight to keep vertical.
Yeah.
And eventually they fail.
Does the branch falling off make the tree now more susceptible to disease because it's got like an open?
It would make it what?
So that branch falling down had there's now sort of it almost looks like an open wound.
Yeah.
Does that make the tree more susceptible to disease?
I would think so. Yeah. They can heal around that if they have a big crown remaining. That the stem that survived is kind of small, so that'll be a real challenge for that tree.
Yeah.
There's a big hole below that already, so that branch probably fell because it's already infected on the inside. So here's the one thing you learn when you core trees. There are a lot of hollow trees in the forest.
Oh.
Yeah, it's really, if people really knew.
Yeah.
But at the same time, trees stand when they're hollow. They're not destined to fall over immediately because they're a little hollow.
Right.
You know, and I don't know my waterfowl at all, but a few winters ago, you know, I saw buffleheads and so many cool waterfowl come and live part of the winter here too. So this bay, or this Powder Mill Pond, is really attractive to lots of waterfowl. So this is the big beech tree that
That's huge.
I've been watching for a long time, so 5-6 years now, and it's one of the bigger, more graceful ones in the forest, but it's got beech leaf disease now. And you can see it probably has beech bark disease too, yeah it does. So it's destined to fall over soon, but it had a big canopy that draped out over the river. You could see the branches are dying, and some have fallen off. It's just a symbol of what's happening.
You're going to miss that one.
Yeah. I'm going to miss it more because it's a sign that we're really losing our American beech.
Yeah.
Seriously. A part of that project that I'm on, we were up in the Adirondacks and other places, and you could not find a forest that had mature American beech in it. It's just, it's actually, in a lot of places, it's almost gone as a species. Functionally as a species. The little saplings will survive. There's a lot of little saplings in here, but I think about the bears. The bears love the beech nuts.
Wow.
And so in one forest though, there were some massive black cherries, and the bears, you'd see their scat, they're eating all the black cherries. So they'll adapt, but a major food source is going, if not gone. And this was a healthy beech stand just 5 years ago, 6 years ago. But beech bark disease and beech leaf disease now have come and hit it, and it's just going to change. That's just the era that we're in. The humans are another asteroid.
Right.
Attack.
Yeah.
The modern human.
Yeah.
The modern capitalist human.
Yeah.
But this was amazing, that beech, because this is a nice stand of large trees. I'm repeating myself, but I really like this grove of big oaks. And I like deadwood, so I'll miss that beech, but deadwood is so important for everything else.
Yeah.
You know? And so this felt to me to be the most natural part of this forest. It's not old growth. I don't believe these big oaks are much older than all the others we've gone by. They might be a little bit older, but I don't think so. But the fact that there's stumps and dead logs scattered throughout this forest means that the ecological processes of turning over the forest, re-enriching the soil, logs are habitat, logs are slow release pills of nutrients and moisture. They hold moisture, and you know, you can see at the bottom of this snag right here, that's where pileated are probing. The standing snag.
Oh yeah.
Those are probes of pileated woodpeckers.
Yeah.
So there are insects in there, it's decaying, and the pileated were checking it out. There's an oak, we won't have time to get to it, there's an oak another half mile that way where I saw where the pileated was probing it, and then it gave up, and now it's almost grown over. So that's the part of the thing that pileated woodpeckers do. They probe trees to see what's useful for them. But this to me is like, I like all forests. I like older forests better because of these processes.
Right.
Trees are apartment houses for animals. Right? We could put more people in a city when we build vertically. So trees are always vertical, but big trees have broken branches. They have crotches in them. They have holes in them. And then eventually they fall over, and that's just so much more habitat than a vigorously growing young forest. I like these forests better for all those reasons. And plus, the diversity of sizes and shapes, they're just aesthetically more pleasing to me. Nice hickory. I mean, even the hickories are big. I'm trying to remember. There's a couple more trees I want to show you. We're getting again down lower, closer to the river. And so here's musclewood again. There's musclewood living in amongst the big oaks. This is the maple leaf that made me realize I needed to
the shade, yeah.
This one is always wonderful color. Ah, yeah. This right here is sassafras.
Oh.
So there's a nice little clonal. I think sassafras also reproduce through their roots. That's a kingfisher. There's always a kingfisher on this trail.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah, I saw him earlier.
And they chatter nonstop. They just chatter, 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 chatter. That's how I identify them. That bird that won't shut up. They're always here. But this is sassafras. Loads and loads and hundreds of loads and tons of loads of sassafras were removed from New England and taken to England once they realized they could make tea out of it.
Oh.
And root beer.
Yep.
So this is a really important tree besides the cool funky shapes and the cool funky leaves.
Well, nobody grows sassafras in England, do they?
Oh, well,
they
I
did,
don't know.
maybe.
Maybe they did, but once they discovered it, they hauled it out of here in big numbers. And so I think there's a little colony of them here. That one, there's one here. There's a little one over there. There's some more up over here somewhere. But anyways, this is a little grove of sassafras in the understory. And that's why I like the species diversity here. They can all kind of get along. There's space for all of them here. The sassafras are small. The oaks are big, and there's space for both. And, you know, maple leaf viburnum. And look how much we're going to miss the beech now.
Yeah,
you see this lovely color?
Yeah, a lot of this color is with beech.
It's all beech.
Yeah.
That's what's going to really be missing here. I took a lot of pictures of the beech in the fall here. Oh. And we're going to have to backtrack just a little bit. There used to be one right along the trail, not far. Oh, it's here, but I can't show it to you as well. But right here, this is American chestnut. It looks like a beech. The leaf is the same, is similar in shape.
Chestnut, yes.
American chestnut.
Oh, wow.
Very, very long leaf, deeply toothed, more deeply toothed than American beech. And so the grand tree that grew 2 to 3 feet in 200 years is now this.
Right.
That's our impact.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so there's... So now we're getting to the... where the Maynard water treatment plant empties into the Assabet. And this is where I almost always hear or see the kingfisher. And I'm pausing here and looking and trying to be a little more quiet. In the wintertime, the cool season, soon, there's almost always a heron here. Sometimes there's 2 or 3. We've seen 4 occasionally. And they're either up high in some of these big oak branches or on this middle branch, or they're standing down in the water themselves and they fish. This is just the warm, nutrient-rich water of our affluent. It's a good place to grow frogs. And it's a good place to feed fish. And we had a cold winter one year early on, probably about 8 years ago or something. And this was all frozen over, but this was all open right here because the warm water coming in. So the animals gathered here because it was, you know, we've got to put our affluent somewhere, and this is what we've chosen as a society to put it, but the animals are adapting to it. And this is a very rich area in terms of animals, especially in the winter. So here, but then especially that large tree with the blue-green trail on it, And then down here that's a yellow birch. And that's the species that I told you early on grows on the north slopes of Summer Hill.
Yeah.
But here it is on the south-facing slope along the Assabet. And the reason is that these soils are wet. In the spring, they're very wet down here. And so trees can survive habitat. Even though it's a more northern species, it can survive quite well here. I guess, because it's so wet down here. And so this is just another example. We've got sassafras, that's a kind of a southern species back there. And now we have yellow birch. A nice little small population of yellow birch. This is where the beaver lived for a while that I used to see. And then there was another one that stretched down the river. I love this red maple. You can see that where the tree fell down, and there's 1, 2, 3 trees coming up off that trunk. This is what nature can do. It just adapts and survives everything that's happened.
Yeah.
Almost everything that's happened. I'm a little surprised we don't see the heron. The one I named Steady got used to me or people, and if I didn't look at it and if I didn't walk at it, it let me walk by without being scared up. Sometimes it hangs out underneath the maples over there. The water is shallow enough. But this is where I'd see that. But maybe it's a little too early yet. Maybe it'll be another month or so. I bet in the next month they'll come back. I hope. You can see the old town marker. I think that's for Sudbury, right?
Sudbury? What's it doing here?
Well, was it? Sudbury used to be here.
Didn't know
Maynard
that.
used to be partly Sudbury and partly Stowe. Maybe that's Stowe.
I'm a recent transplant, so
So it's Maynard used to be part of 2 other towns. And I haven't pursued what marker that is
Okay,
for.
yeah.
But Acton is just up over that way a little ways. And it's a really wonderful trail continuing on. It gets younger and a little more disturbed. There's a really nice wetland forest out beyond this one a little bit. But this is the main portion of the Maynard stretch.
Yes, yeah, we're close to the boundary, aren't we? Yeah.